When it comes to running missions safely in low sec, the Bhaalgorn isn't usually high up on my list, mostly because the Bhaalgorn is slow. The range on the pulse lasers on the Bhaalgorn is around 32-35 kilometers, which can be considered a little bit short in some cases. But at the same time, the Bhaalgorn is still one of the scariest ships to fight, and the Blood Raider ships are going to win most 1v1 fights that they can get into. Now, the stats on the Bhaalgorn are still the same. You will have excellent Nosferatu performance, excellent Neutralizer performance. Now, the laser damage is going to be nice, and the tracking is also going to be nice, but like I mentioned before, the range on the pulse lasers on this ship is perhaps going to be a little bit short in some cases. The other stats are also very nice. The Bhaalgorn is primarily a armor tank, but in some cases the shield tank works as well. Fantastic capacitor performance. The ship has the best capacitor out of any other battleship in the game. Now, one thing to keep in mind, the Bhaalgorn is slow, might very well be the slowest battleship in the game, so don't expect the ship to be very fast. Now, one thing that I'll have to change is the nanocore look. I don't like the current design that I have on this ship. 1,800 DPS, which is not bad. I have pulse lasers. 32.76 km is the range, 6.5 km is the accuracy fall-off, tracking 9.95, activation time 7.85 seconds, which is okay. Now in the medium slots I have dual Nosferatus, one neutralizer, one web, and one long range disruptor. Now this is a PvP build, a build that is very similar to the build that I used on my own Bhaalgorn. I tried to replicate the build as best as possible. Now the rigs are focused full on tank, maximum possible resistance and repair capability, and for the engineering rigs I have capacitor rigs. However, my old Bhaalgorn did have integration rigs as well on both the combat and engineering rig section, and well, I did use the capacitor rigs as well. Now this is a sleeper core that I just had laying around, so I have decided to just use it, but I don't really like how this ship looks, so I will have to change that later on. Now as for the implants, there is 3 implants that you can use. You can use the focus crystal, pulse crystal, or the thermal circulation. Now the focus crystal works nice, works really well if you like to use the ship in high sec systems for high sec encounters. The general unit layout is going to be changed. Basically, I want to focus on armor repair, afterburner speed, Nosferatu and neutralizer strength, or Nosferatu and neutralizer range. Now, my advice would be to use the extra range on the Nosferatus and on the neutralizer, because that will help a lot against ships, especially against pirate ships in low sec. If you get tackled, then with the extra range on the general units and on the Nosferatus or neutralizers, you can easily repel any tackle ship that is going to stay perhaps outside of the laser range. Now the ships that can easily kill the Bhaalgorn are Mordu cruisers, the Mordu cruiser because there is only one of them, and any other kite cruiser can easily kill a Bhaalgorn 1v1, especially if they stay out of your laser range. So for defense, it is going to be very important to have extra range on the Nosferatus and on the neutralizers. That way you can reach the long range tackle ship, and this is the layout that I have with the pulse crystal. And of course the capacitor is 40 minutes and 5 seconds with this current layout, mostly because I have increased the performance of the armor repairs and on the afterburner but at the same time they use a little bit more capacitor, but still the capacitor on the Bhaalgorn will last for a very long time. Now let me show you the pulse crystal, also a very useful one. Now the pulse crystal is also known as the Bhaalgorn implant because the pulse crystal works really well with Blood Raider ships, especially if we consider the fact that the Blood Raiders have the best capacitors out of any other ship in the game. So this implant is going to be one of the better choices that you can use on the ship. Now keep in mind that this implant works really well with armor tanks because the other active skill of the implant sacrifices shield in order to get extra capacitor. So if your Bhaalgorn is a shield tank, then I would not be using this implant on that ship because it will basically kill your own tank. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The general unit setup is basically the same as with the focus crystal. Go for armor repairs, afterburners, Nosferatu and neutralizer strength or range. And now I have 2021.23 DPS. Now you can use dual webs and triple Nosferatus, that way your capacitor will be in a very stable shape, as you can see here. Or you can use the classic PvE Bhaalgorn setup with triple webs and dual Nosferatus. This is a build that I see a lot more often. The Bhaalgorn has a very nice web range, and triple webs are very nice for PvE. Can also be good for defense. If the target is orbiting within the web range, you can easily web them and kill them. Now I did say that you can use the thermal circulation. Now this is more for the PvP build, and if you like tank, then this implant is going to be very nice. It will give you basically extra plus 20% armor resistance on all damage types, and you can make the Bhaalgorn very tanky with this implant. Now of course you will not have any extra DPS, and this is of course a implant for railguns, but the passive bonus of the implant can be easily used for all armor tanks, including the Bhaalgorn. So let's take a look at the active stats. Now if I decide to go back to the Bhaalgorn, I will probably use a setup that is very similar to this setup that I have. Implant wise, I will probably be using the thermal circulation on this ship. And speaking of the Bhaalgorn, feel free to tell me if you would like to see this ship back. I haven't been flying the Bhaalgorn in a very long time now, but if you like to see the ship back, then feel free to tell me in the comments, because I do kind of miss flying this ship. The Bhaalgorn was really good and still is a excellent ship. 81, 81, 83 and 84% resistance, 455,000 hit points, 440.90 meter per second is the speed, and the DPS is still 1,800, which honestly it's not that bad, considering the fact that this is still the slowest battleship in the game. I don't know if there is anything slower than the Bhaalgorn. I think this is literally the slowest battleship in the game. Okay, now it will be time to go and run some storylines. Sweet Poison will be the mission that I'll be running with the Bhaalgorn. Now, I did change the look of this ship. As you can see, this is the look that I like, the good old Blood Raider camouflage. The best looking, definitely the best looking pattern in the whole game. One of the favorite things that I have is definitely how scary these things look. Okay, now I'm using the pulse crystal with triple webs, and this would be the layout that I'll be using throughout this mission. Now I would most likely be using the focus crystal now, but the Bhaalgorn can miss the target sometimes. The focus crystal is really good if you like to run missions in high sec. For low sec, I prefer to have the stable DPS without the accidental miss that can delete all the DPS. So the pulse crystal would work really well, and you get a permanent DPS boost that should stay at a very decent level, because after all, you do have the best possible capacitor. The Bhaalgorn's capacitor is really good, so it should maintain a high percentage throughout the whole mission. Now the implant is active, and as you can see, my shield is rapidly going down. This is why you don't use this implant with any shield tanks. Would be very weird to use a shield tank with this implant. You basically kill your own tank, and yeah, that's not a very good idea. Now the Bhaalgorn's tracking is very nice. It does track small targets at close distances. The webs do help a lot, and small targets that do get webbed are usually going to be destroyed very quickly. That includes the tackle pirate ships. Now I usually don't like to use ships that have short range inside storyline missions, mostly because that is a very vulnerable to attack ship. However, at the same time, the Bhaalgorn is one of the scariest ships that you can fight, and that alone can be used as a good, I guess, defense against pirates, because not many will be bold enough to actually go and engage one of these ships. Usually, if someone does engage a Bhaalgorn, they know what they're doing, and they have the build that is going to counter the ship easily. Now, how do you counter a Bhaalgorn? Well, you definitely don't want to brawl with a Bhaalgorn, because these ships will win most close range 1v1s. They will lose against ships that are specifically built to destroy Bhaalgorns, and that usually means that ships with very high DPS, a Macariel for example, with the barrage implant can easily delete a Bhaalgorn, if the Bhaalgorn is tackled of course. So we have to be careful around ships that are built to engage one of these monsters, because most ships that are built to engage anything else are not going to be able to fight with a Bhaalgorn, mostly because that involves them getting close, and if they get close, you have webs, you have Nosferatus or neutralizers, and that is going to be more than enough to cap their ship and basically shoot them down. Now most skilled hunters know that, and most skilled hunters will engage a Bhaalgorn with a specific build that is made to counter a Bhaalgorn, and that's one of the reasons why I find flying this ship risky in missions, of course, because at the same time you are safe, but at the same time you really are not safe, because if there is a hunting fleet that knows what they're doing, you basically have very little chances to defend your ship if they have the right build. Now one I guess factor that is making everything easier is the fact that most hunters are hunting in a small fleet, mostly a Covertops cruiser alongside a tackle bomber or something similar. It is not that common to find a fleet like our own fleet. We basically are prepared for any other ship, for any ship in the game, including the Bhaalgorn, and our efficacy rate and success rate at killing these ships is very high. So a specialized fleet like our fleet does have a very good chance at killing one of these ships. However, the classic hunter, the classic small fleet, usually would avoid fighting these ships. If they do engage, then most likely you have a good chance at defeating them. Now I know I talked with a lot of players who use the Bhaalgorn with in the storyline missions, and So far it seems to be working for them, so that's something that I'm very happy to hear. So I guess if you can make it work, it works, and that's all what matters. That's all that matters in the end. Now, so far the capacitor is not as stable as I expected it to be. Keep in mind that my general units here are mostly focused on getting extra performance out of the modules, which in return does impact the capacitor a little bit.
We're under attack.
Most of the other Bhaalgorns that might be running missions will have a much more stable capacitor, because they would be using different general units, or perhaps they would not be using any implants. Now it's not really required that you have the implants. The Bhaalgorn runs really well even without. The only, I guess, advantage that you can feel with the implants is in high sec, but at the same time it's not really 100% like you have to go and buy implants. In my case, I rarely use them. I mostly use the thermal circulation for the tank, and that's about it. I did start to fly the Cinnabel and Stabber 2 again, because I missed flying cruisers, so you can expect cruiser PvP coming up very soon. And it also made me ask myself the question, should I go back to the Bhaalgorn? I haven't been flying the ship in a long time, mostly because kind of, you know, the fun that I had kind of went away, because I wanted to use the ship for solo, but unfortunately, you know, solo nowadays is a little bit in the realm of impossibility almost. You really have to be lucky with target, because most have these one-click escape cores, most have like a lot of stabs. And the Blood Raiders, while they are able to basically win every 1v1 if you know what you're doing, holding the target is a big problem, because most Blood Raider ships have at best 1 or 2 long-range disruptors or 1 or 2 scramblers, because most of the strength for these ships comes from the Nosferatus, neutralizers and webs. And a Blood Raider that does not use the neutralizers, webs and Nosferatus is basically wasting its potential, and having a lot of stabs is definitely going to be a good protection against these ships. But at the same time, if you like to fly them, then you will not have a lot of solo action with these ships. You will have to have a dedicated tackle ship, or well, you will have to use a bubble. And well, if you are using a bubble or tackle ship, that's no longer solo, and well, makes solo combat with the Bhaalgorn extremely difficult. Not because the ship is bad. You will win any and most closed space arena fights with the Bhaalgorn, because these ships are made for that. They're the best solo ships. Surprisingly, and kind of ironically, the best solo ship that will win the most fights, but at the same time not being able to hold the target is kind of funny. I have to say that's a little bit funny and sad at the same time, because these ships are so much fun to fly, but at the same time it's not really fun when the target just warps away when they start losing. So that's the main drawback for these ships in PvP. In missions, the only drawback that I can find in missions is the fact that these things are slow. They're very slow, and I noticed that they have the worst lock-on time out of any other battleship. And this is something that I believe is common for Blood Raiders. For example, the Macariel does lock on fairly quickly. However, the Bhaalgorn does take some time to lock on some targets, especially frigates and other very small ships. That is something that you should keep in mind when flying these monsters. Now, this monster that I'm currently flying here does run really well so far. The armor tank is pretty solid. Now, I've heard that this mission is a little bit heavy on the armor, and it can be a little bit difficult for armor tanks, so that's why I picked this mission. I was very curious to know how can the armor tank on the ship hold out. Now the build that I use, like I mentioned before on the start of the video, is basically the build that I used on my own Bhaalgorn. My Bhaalgorn had full-on 4P rig integrations and 3P integrations on the engineering rigs, and it was able to hold out for a very long time with all modules active. Of course, that was a PvP build, and I very rarely used that Bhaalgorn for missions. I basically sold most of the expensive modules that I had, and the future goal, like I believe most of you already know, is the Chemosh, and that thing is going to be one of the I guess next Blood Raider ships that I will fly. Now of course, if you guys would like me to go back in the Bhaalgorn, I can do that fairly easily. I'm just kind of I haven't really decided yet. I have a lot of ISK on my disposal. I have a lot of, I guess, experience with all ships, and currently kind of not sure what to fly next. So if you would like me to go back to the Bhaalgorn, I can easily do that, or the Ashimu, but the Ashimu is definitely not what it used to be. I remember the days when I was flying the Cinnabel, and the only faction cruiser that I would not dare to engage was the Ashimu, because the Ashimu, like the Bhaalgorn, is literally going to win 99% of 1v1s. Well, that was back then. Now things have changed. Now I would jump on the Ashimu with the Cinnabel without a second thought, which is a little bit sad because the Ashimu lost a lot of the character that it had, mostly because of the nanocores, of the new nanocores that made webs pointless and useless. So yeah, that's a very sad thing that happened. And of course, implants have changed the game quite a bit. So a Barar Cinnabel eats an Ashimu alive. So yeah, that's why I did go back to the Cinnabel. But who knows, perhaps it will change. I'm still very excited for the... Not really sure if the new Q&A has been out. I don't wanna spoil anything, but it looks pretty good. It does look pretty good, and I'm really excited for the new ships, and not capital ships. No, I'm personally excited for the new advanced battle cruisers and frigates that will be released in this year, because there is a big chance, big chance that we get a Rifter 2, a tier 10 version of the Rifter. That's so-called a useful Rifter, and I'll fly that thing. By the way, I'm going to fly the tier 2 Rifter or the tier 10 Rifter, or whatever it's being called, because I know that there's going to be... I just know that there's going to be a useful variant of the Rifter, and well, that's one of my favorite ships of all time, so that's how I become a frigate pilot. Vagabond, also a ship that I'm looking forward to, and many other special ships, tier 2 ships from Even Line that I also like, and when they land in the game, I'm all over them. I already have manufacturing skills. Can you believe that the new stuff that I've heard that is probably going to arrive? I did go and skill for manufacturing. I have industry skills now, and I'm improving them every day. So that's the next thing that I'm doing with my skills.
Ships detected.
Now the Bhaalgorn here is clearing the mission very efficiently. I have to say, the 3000, 3.1, 3.2000 DPS that you get with this current build is actually pretty solid. It does feel like
We're under
It does
attack.
feel like I have a lot more DPS than with the Space Pen or with the Typhoon 2. The alpha damage is also really good. Sometimes goes to 36,000, but on average it's like 12,000. After all, you have to remember that lasers do most damage on shield, but on armor the damage does kind of fall off. Because on shield you will do mostly EM damage and the lasers do about 80% EM. On the armor you will mostly do thermal damage, which goes to about 20% of the laser damage. Now the DPS on the Blood Raider ships was never really that high to begin with. The way how these ships work in PvP is you kill the tank of your target slowly, and once their tank is out, then the ship dies fairly easily. And this is why the Blood Raiders have such a very nasty reputation in PvP, or at least they used to have, because nowadays the Blood Raiders are not what they used to be honest. They used to be so much more fun. But as time went on and as new things have been added, they have been kind of hard countering the Blood Raiders to such an extent that they don't feel as fun as they used to be, which is again very sad. I know a lot of you still fly the Blood Raiders, and well, I wish that I was flying the Ashmu now. I wish that we had no stabs and none of these stupid Enocors that give immunity to stuff were ever released, you know? Because I would still be flying the Ashmu. I still would be roaming with the Ashmu in null, probably hunting lowsec as well. Because if there was a ship that I was confident with, if there was a ship that I can safely say that I've never lost a fight with, that was the Ashram. I've never lost a fight with that thing ever since I've started using it like, I don't know, 3 years ago. That's the only ship that
Enemy
has no
ships
fail
detected.
rate in my fleet. The only ship. I had fails with the
We're
Cinnabal, I
under
had fails
attack.
with the Ortus, I had fails with most ships, which is normal. However, with the
We're
Ashmo,
under
I
attack.
don't have any fails with that thing. The only thing that you can consider a
We're
fail is
under
when the target
attack.
just warps off when they start losing because they have stabs. But again, that's not really a fail on my part, so that's why I really have a special place for Blood Raider ships. They never failed me, and very very sad that I can't have fun with these ships as much as I used to. Very sad that that's the reality that we have in the game right now. But who knows? Perhaps in the near future that will be changed. Again, I'm very excited for the new ships that are going to come out. I don't want to spoil much. I think most of you already know that by now. But after you fly most ships in the game, every other ship just becomes kind of a little bit boring, to be honest. So a pilot that literally flew everything might start to ask for new ships, and this is why I started to fly the capital ships, because that's one aspect of the game that I did not fully experience. Now I did, so the capital ships are nice, but I want to fly something different. And I'm glad that the new manufacturing process is added, so that way we can easily start with some new ships that I'm definitely going to be enjoying, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys would also enjoy these ships because they're really fun. Speaking from my EVE Online experience. Now I stopped counting at what wave I am. I think this might be the last wave. The tank did hold really well. The capacitor also holds out really well. I'm quite happy with the result with this Bhaalgorn. It's still quite tanky. Now with the thermal implant I could make this thing a lot more tankier, but at the same time, since I already have the laser implants over here, I might as well use them. And as with the previous videos that I made, always focus down the small ships first, always focus down the ships with webs, with scramblers, because that's basically going to be the main threat inside of a low sec mission. Always shoot down ships that have webs and scramblers. That way, if something goes wrong, you can easily warp away. Now here I basically started to shoot at the first ship that my mouse clicks on, which is not something that you should do. You should focus the small ships first. Once all the small ships have been killed, then that will leave us with the big ships. Be careful around the battleship elites, because they have webs and they do have a scrambler. So if you don't have any stabs, then make sure that you don't fly close to them, because then you will be stuck until they are destroyed. And having the option to easily warp away at any moment is very important. So make sure that you shoot down the small things first and keep range with the elites. Now my orbit is set to be at about 22 kilometers, but your orbit might be different. I recommend that you keep your orbit within the optimal range of your Nosferatus. That way you will have a very steady income of capacitor, and that way your ship will be always at its best performing state if you use the implant, because with this implant the higher capacitor is, the more damage you will do. And this is where perhaps a triple Nosferatu setup might be a better idea, because with triple Nosferatus you can easily maintain the capacitor at a high percentage. But again, if I were using the normal ship here, then my capacitor would be at a very nice percentage, but I use the general units to increase the performance of the armor repairs and afterburner, which is also an important factor if your ship is lacking in some other aspects. But so far I'm pretty sure that whatever combination you do with this current layout, it's going to work really well, because the difference is minimal. The only thing that I would really change is I would add more range on the Nosferatu and on the neutralizer. That way you can easily counter those long-range tackle ships, because once their capacitor is out you can easily warp away, and this is one way how you can defend yourself against these pirate ships that are quite common in low sec. So that would be, I would say, my advice for the Bhaalgorn. But at the same time, in null sec it works really well if you like to run anomalies. In null sec it runs really well in high sec as well. So overall, a pretty fun to fly ship. It's one of the more expensive faction battleships, but at the same time it does deliver for the price. And well, the mission has been completed. I really miss flying this ship a lot more often, so if you would like me to fly the Bhaalgorn into PvP again, then again feel free to tell me in the comments down below. And well, with that being said, hope that the builds that you see here can help you at building your own ship. Hope that you enjoyed, hope that you had fun. Stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.